It is official. Jesse Marsch is the new Leeds United boss, becoming just the third American to ever take charge of a Premier League team. I'm Heath Pearce. He's Jimmy Conrad, and we're getting into the topic of America's best coaches. We'll also talking some MLS. The USMNT Hour begins right now. Now, we're going to get straight into it. Jimmy Conrad, what's going on, man? It's good to see your face again.
It's great. I'm happy to be back. I missed a couple of assignments, as it were, to go on a family vacation. I unplugged for a little bit, Heath, and I felt like I was missing out. And turns out I was missing out. There's a lot of big news that's been going around the beautiful game around the world, and some big matches, of course. And, of course, this news. I was here for this news, though, so I'm excited about that.
Jimmy, I will say this, that LME set the tone. And then when LME would take time off, you and I would do some takeovers, things like that, not just for our USMNT hours, you would quickly see how much fun he was having on some sort of tropical island. So if there's anyone to blame LME. This is his show. We're just filling in, trying to talk a little USMNT hour. But Jimmy, let's get straight into the statement that U.S. Soccer made. And obviously we're going to talk about Jesse Marsch and all the best American coaches that we think exist at the moment. More of informed coaches, I guess, at the moment. But U.S. Soccer put out the statement, which I was, and maybe, Des, if you got it in front of you, we can throw it up on the screen. But this is one that I was pleasantly surprised. Now, obviously, you never have to see a statement like this, but I was surprised in the fact that U.S. Soccer put out such a direct statement. And I feel like not that I held U.S. Soccer to a different standard, but it was nice to see them sort of not work around. We obviously go back to Chelsea's statement when they released it, and it was the situation in Ukraine and things like that, and you could tell that each word was truly scrutinized, and it seemed like this one, a real statement from U.S. Soccer, which I think is, as they've gone through, settled the lawsuit with the women, they've got new CBAs going on. This is a good start for the future, I think, for them for standing for these types of things, or standing against these types of things, and very clearly. What's your take on this?
Well, I'll read it so everybody that's just listening can hear the words. It says, the U.S. Soccer Federation stands united with the people of Ukraine and is unequivocal in our denunciation of the heinous and inhumane invasion by Russia. I will add, those are some very big words they're using. We will neither tarnish our global game nor dishonor Ukraine by taking the same field as Russia, no matter the level of competition or circumstance, until freedom and peace have been restored. Hashtag we stand with Ukraine. Thoughts on this, Heath, is, all right, a little backbone. We got some backbone, U.S. Soccer Federation. And that we are, I guess where I have a little bit of an issue is that we're still holding a World Cup in Qatar. And this isn't isolated to U.S. Soccer. This is all the federation. And I think it's important to have some backbone and to stand up for what's right. But I would just wish this was across the board with the messaging, again, not isolated to U.S. Soccer, but they're involved in this too, where obviously this is very serious. This is very serious stuff. And I look forward to Rob Harris coming on tomorrow on the podcast so we can get all of his insight. But yeah, it's I just wish that was, I don't know. It's really like we're going to tap dance into some interesting waters here, but
but Jimmy, I mean, my whole thing is that it's a starting place, right? I mean,
sure.
You and I right now, or for those of you who can see us visually on camera, whether it's your background, my background, things we're wearing, things we're doing, you could really break down everything that we do and really scrutinize. But anytime somebody, I think, takes a stance like this and historically haven't at the level that I would be satisfied with, is just something worth noting. But I don't want to linger too much on that. Obviously, Rob Harris is going to come on and talk more about this. But let's talk about Jesse Marsch. It's official. Obviously, Fabrizio Romano, who very rarely gets it wrong, stated that yesterday. We talked about it a little bit with on the weekend recap with LME. We missed you, by the way. But now it's official. It's official statement. He's done a press conference. I mean, we knew this was sort of lingering. There were some rumors around this. It's still, at the time for me, didn't make a lot of sense because I was like, this is a guy coming off of a rough spell at RB Leipzig. Now you're going to throw him to an even bigger club, an even more historic club, or a historic club, I should say. I don't want to say more historic than RB Leipzig because I'll get in trouble for saying that. But, I guess, what's your initial sort of feeling of Jesse Marsch being put into this position? It's not an easy one.
No, it's not. And I applaud his courage for wanting to take over with 12 games left, with them being 2 points outside of the relegation zone. From what I understand, they had a verbal agreement in place 2 weeks ago about him taking over in the summer. And they were going to have Bielsa had come to an end and knew that he was going to resign at the end of the season. But giving up 12 goals in 3 games in a week, not a good look, and the team just needs something a little bit different, but not drastically different. And that's why I think this appointment could be very good for Jesse Marsch, because he plays a similar style and has a similar ideology.
Hey, were you listening to my podcast yesterday?
I wasn't.
It sounds like you're taking my Sunday and making it your Monday. No, I'm just kidding. But like I was saying the same things, that it's not an extreme thing, right?
It's because we're smart and handsome. Why would we not say the same things, Heath Pearce?
Well, also because, I asked you what my take should be yesterday. You gave it to me. Now you're using it today. And I specifically paid you a lot of money for that take so you couldn't use it. But no, I think you're spot on with just the similarities, right? You're talking about incremental differences. Yeah, obviously you're not going to go from man mark to man. You're going to zonal defense. But in terms of where you press and how you press, those types of things, I think there's certainly just a little bit of building a little more of a foundation or stuff that you could just make 5% better here and there that could right the ship. Do you think that this?
Let me go right into what you said about zonal, from man marking to zonal defense, because I had the opportunity to live that. So when I went to Kansas City and played for Bob Gansler, who coached us in the World Cup in 1990, he may or may not be on a list of mine for not current coaches of all time, but all-time U.S. soccer coaches. We'll get into that later. But when I first got there to Kansas City, we had Preki, who two-time league MLS MVP, pulling the strings, doesn't want to play a lot of defense. So we played a 3-man back line, and I did a lot of thankless work, man marking my ass off all the other top strikers. And it was not fun. Preki breaks his leg the following year, and we switch to a back 4, and we go on to win the Open Cup and get to the MLS Cup final, and we're one point away from winning the Supporters Shield. I mean, we had a very, very good team. And that was such a breath of fresh air to go from man marking to zonal. And just that it just allowed us to do things. It almost feels like we can conserve our energy in a different way. We have to use our brains as well. It becomes less physical and more mental. And I think the physical component is key to the way that Bielsa wants to play, and now that Jesse Marsch wants to play. But if you could just add a layer of that from a defensive perspective, they need it. They've given up 60 goals in 26 games in the Premier League. That is terrible. That is
I think it's 20 this. I think it's 20 this month. In the month of February.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. So they need to figure that part out. And I think going from man marking to zonal will just give them that immediate boost. Plus, they got Liam Cooper, the 30-year-old Scottish international center back, coming back into the team. Calvin Phillips should be coming back into the team. Patrick Bamford should be coming back into the team. So the spine of their team, who they relied upon a lot over the last 2 seasons, will be back in place, or at least be emerging back into place over the next few weeks. That's going to be pretty vital for Jesse as well. So all the elements are there for them to go on a run, but you still got to go out there and get results.
Yeah, what's weird to me is that he came out of a situation at RB Leipzig, right, where he had the same thing that Bielsa had, which is a bunch of injuries, departed players, changes that didn't necessarily suit him, not given the opportunity to make all the signings and changes that he wanted. And now he's getting the opposite. Like, if he had gone through January, you see RB Leipzig climbs back to the top 4 in the Bundesliga. It's similar to this situation here, where now he's stepping into where the team is actually getting its players back. Yes, they're in a poor run of form, but I wonder if Jesse Marsch could have been able to right the ship at RB Leipzig had he had the same thing that you just mentioned in terms of the way it's shaping for him to see out the season. Do you think there's a risk of relegation, or do you think that there's enough that he could do just tactically alone, that this team has the quality to stay in the Premier League, obviously?
Man, that's a good question. I mean, we talked about Wolves being top 4. And then they've now dropped points in 2 really important games for them. So the proof's in the pudding, right? And now they've got a big week. And now he's got, 5 days to implement his own ideology into the team. And I think you got to go from back to front. You got to work on that defense. You got to be a little bit more stout. We've seen it with Tuchel. We've seen it with Lampard to a certain extent, maybe more with Gerrard. Like, they wanted to get the defensive side of the ball figured out first and then move forward from there. That's where I think you go tactically. And I think the zonal defending will help. But you still have to make sure everybody's buying in and understands how to move, especially in high-pressure situations, which is not always that easy. That said, I wonder about this week, because they play Leicester away, and Leicester haven't been good at home, so that's still a possibility to steal a point, but you have to be paying attention to some of their players, and I love Patson Daka, by the way. Fun fact, though, Patson Daka played for Jesse at RB Salzburg, so maybe he knows a little insight on how to slow him down. I'm sure he does. And then they're at home to Aston Villa, and then at home to Norwich. That's their next week of games.
Yeah.
Those 2 home games is so mad. I mean, you got to get at least 6, I'd say. I mean, you got to be hoping for 9, of course, but settling for 6. I mean, they need points badly. Maybe they'll take 4. You lose away to Leicester, you draw to Aston Villa, and you beat Norwich. And I guess everybody would be happy with that. But again, to win over the fans, especially a cult figure like Bielsa, it's going to be how they play.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that they're going to be excited about what Jesse can instill into the team, because he's all hard on the sleeve. He's all for the fans, for the emotion, everything that all those elements that are important to fans, that even if it's not going well and they're not scoring or winning, is there that extra thing that the fans know that the players are giving everything that they have? And under Jesse, that won't be a problem.
Yeah, and obviously that's a great point from Natalie that we just threw up on the screen there, that it's big shoes to fill. And obviously anybody that's watching this right now, share your thoughts about Marsh to Leeds, and like the video, subscribe, and all that good stuff so we can keep on growing this community. And Jimmy's showing a mug right now that says "Soccer Moms Rock."
They do.
They really do. Jimmy, how important do you think this is for just American coaches, right? We go back to Bob Bradley. It was sort of a cautionary tale of somebody that came in. We were all really excited. It was short-lived. Maybe wasn't the right club. I feel like the fact that he was an American and the fact that the fans turned on him quickly, they had him out. Now, Jesse, I think, is very immersive into the cultures. Obviously, we've seen him learn German very quickly. We've seen just sort of his approach to winning people over. But he was also at a point at Leipzig where he was like, I don't think I'm the right guy to carry this thing forward. Do you think, what do you think this does for just the reputation? Or are we going to have to check in 3 months' time and say, okay, we got out of this. Maybe this helps us? Because it could hurt us just as much as it could help us at this point.
Sure.
I say us as in like the American.
Well, I'll say this really quick from Jesse's perspective. Because he's already had a verbal agreement in place, from what I understand from pretty good sources, for the last couple of weeks, and because he's got a relationship with Victor Orta, the sporting director for Leeds, and that there's been conversations, I think even prior to the verbal agreement, about, hey, what do you think about maybe taking over for Bielsa? I like that Jesse's already been thinking about Leeds. It's not like they just plucked him out of nowhere and he hasn't had any time to prepare. I guarantee you that guy's been studying since that call came from Victor Orta. Like, he's been watching ways of how he could shift. And it must be weird. Like, I'm going to follow up Marcelo Bielsa and I'm going to do these things better, and that must be a little odd.
Well, the Bielsa thing's hard because there wasn't he's a hero because of what he brought the club back to the Premier League. They had a great first season in the Premier League, and he's a hero to the fans. But ultimately, they're on a free fall right now towards relegation, and some of his tactics and ideas, or lack thereof, were really problematic to the long-term success of the club. So this is one that I look at him and go, if the fans truly give him a chance, if the club really gives him a chance. You just talked about the sporting director. You talked about how they had this plan in place. You also have this increasing stake from an American company that over the next few years will be a full buyout of Leeds. There's just obviously something there that I'm just hoping this isn't like this is the best guy on the market, and there's more of a, to get us to the end of the season, and more of a, this is the best guy in the market that we want and we need, and that we believe is going to build something for the future. So you think reputationally, does it make a difference? As Pablo throws up on the screen, is Jesse Marsh arriving to Leeds a better coach than Bob Bradley was when he took over Swansea?
I would say yes, because I think there's been enough time since him getting fired from RB Leipzig. He's probably got, we had him on CBS Sports HQ, and he said that was the first time we asked him, what beach he was sipping martinis on or whatever, margaritas. And he said he's actually spending time with his family. The first time he's done that in like 8 or 9 years. So he's had just a couple months to decompress.
Well, the last time he did, I think he traveled Europe for like a year or something with his family. The last window in that gap when he went straight into full-time managerial stuff, which is interesting, in terms of getting that family time. We're seeing that theme, especially I think pandemic-related. People are seeing that theme of kind of like spending more time with family started to become a thing again, instead of a regret of having not done it future. But sorry to interrupt you there.
No, I think that's great insight. And I forgot that he had done that. But it's one of those things where Bob came in, had obviously a very, I think, incredible run and a meaningful and emotional run with Egypt as the manager of Egypt after the men's national team. Then he went to Stabæk in Norway, and then went to second division in France, and then took the job at Swansea. And even though he had proven
he had 8 points in 11 games for those that don't know what Bob's record was.
Yes, for Swansea, and it just felt like he got set up to fail. And I think that Jesse comes into this a little bit more. He just got punched in the face, right? There's that famous Mike Tyson quote. We say it all the time. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and he had that. He had it at RB Leipzig, and he got punched in the face. Where I don't think he was ready for that. I think he had known a lot of those players as an assistant at an Nagelsmann and coached a few of them, Szoboszlai in particular at Salzburg, and obviously familiar with Tyler Adams. And he came in with knowing some of the players in the system, of course. And it didn't work out. And that has to hurt, man. That has to hurt your pride and your ego. And I think you learn from that. Now, conversely, I actually thought he got a lot out of Christopher Nkunku, who's gone on to have continues to have a
hold
great
on real quick, Jimmy. Let me ask you this on egos, right? Do you think that you're capable of reflecting that quickly? Or is it a personality type that's able to take that knock and turn it into a learning experience? Or because I think about my playing career, right? And I think about at times I was able to convert that into usable information. But other times I'd be like, yo, F that guy, you know what I mean? Like your ego comes into play going like,
sure.
you guys screwed me. You got, RB Leipzig didn't give me the signings that I wanted. You never say that out loud, but there's still,
of course,
I guess how much are you capable of learning from failure that adapts your environments? Because I look at Bob Bradley and failures and whatever. And I don't know if Bob's, I'm sure, evolved and grown as a coach, but I would say that his approach, from what I've understood from players, is relatively the same as it was a decade ago.
Yeah, so I think Bob was a little bit older in his process. I think Jesse is still growing. I think he's
giving me the old dog, new tricks.
I just think that Jesse's still in the growth mindset. I think he seems like he wants to learn. Yes, he could go to RB Leipzig and say, I didn't have Upamecano, I didn't have Konate, you didn't replace them with experience. You gave me some good young defenders, but not a lot of experience. Then you allow Sabitzer to go to Bayern Munich. Also,
Szoboszlai's injured.
Yeah, Szoboszlai's hurt. And then you give me Andre Silva up top, who banged in a bunch of goals for Eintracht, but for whatever reason can't score for us when we need him to. You let go Patrick Schick, who obviously had a tremendous Euros and is doing great now. I mean, there was so many things that he could go back. And then we could say that Gulacsi in goal was terrible to start the season. I mean, the guy was bad in goal and gave up really soft goals that we hadn't seen him do consistently. And these guys have played a lot of games, and a lot of them that played over the summer didn't get a lot of rest. So I can understand why there's a bit of a drop-off, and it just was a little unfortunate. So, yes, there's plenty of excuses we can make for Jesse there, but it didn't work out, and he couldn't figure out his way through that. But he got some tremendous experience along the way, playing in the Champions League, against Man City, against PSG. All that stuff is going to be so important for his development as a coach. And I think he sees, when I talk to him, he's got a growth mindset, man. And at some point, I think when you get to a certain age, you're like, I am who I am, and I don't give a shit about anybody else, and that's fine. And maybe that's where Bob is at this point. But with regard to Jesse, I still feel like he knows there's room to grow. He's not going to pretend to know more than Bielsa, of course, who he's following. So it's interesting. Now, what I will say, Bob got a raw deal. He spent 85 days at Swansea. Didn't even get a transfer window. Had 11 games. 2 wins, 7 losses, 2 draws, as you mentioned, 8 points. And I think that Jesse comes into it maybe a little bit more prepared for what's coming, right? Because he had a little bit of that Bundesliga, and I'm sure that pressure from going from Austria to Germany, you're like, oh, okay, so now it's a little bit more. I'm getting scrutinized a little bit more, and that sucks when things aren't going well. And then he's going to take another jump to getting even more scrutinized, especially following a cult figure as beloved as Bielsa. That's going to be his biggest challenge, I think, is kind of keeping that. Obviously, he's going to pay his respects. I just think that Jesse's maybe a little bit more media savvy than Bob, and I think that's going to really help him out a ton as he tries to navigate the high waters of the high seas, as it were, of this situation, because it's not an easy one to walk into. But I do want to applaud his confidence for taking the job, because he could have waited to the summer and had a whole summer to get to know his players and bring in Brendan Aronson or whoever else and build his team and put his fingerprints on it. But now he's like, all right, I'm going to take it. So there's something to be said for that for sure.
Well, do you think that he's the top American coach right now across the board? Because, I mean, this is all a little bit arbitrary, and I actually came up with the top 5 that I want you to sort of tear apart or shred apart if you want, and we'll get to that in a second. But do you, like, naturally, to kind of tee up this conversation, do you think Marsh is the number 1 coach? And again, performance aside, because you can't really give him that performance, but the fact that he is being seen or touted by a Premier League team that is a huge historic club to take over in a moment of peril seems to me like you get some points for that, right? And you're coming from an RB Leipzig. You came from a Bundesliga club where you sort of failed, but somebody still sees something in you in a way that was perhaps unrealized. And we've seen a lot of people we've seen Des throw up a bunch of comments of people that are standing by Jesse Marsch and not going like, oh, he's overrated or anything like that. They're actually saying he was in a tough situation at RB Leipzig, didn't get the players, just like all the things we mentioned. He had a whole bunch of injuries. The players didn't want to do the work and all that sort of stuff. So is he your top?
He probably is my top. I think there's room for discussion, of course, but I would say because of where he's cut his teeth, because of what he's about to take on, and I just tweeted this out about an hour ago, but I feel like from a player perspective, I don't know if we've broken through a glass ceiling, a male American perspective, soccer player perspective, which I think is important because our females absolutely crush it. Way to go, ladies. But on the male side, it feels like we've started to make inroads, that we've changed the perception of American players, that you can trust them to make plays in big games, whether they're playing for Chelsea or Barcelona or Juventus. I mean, these are big clubs. I guess the final frontier would be getting a Galactico, getting over to Real Madrid and breaking into a couple more teams, but we're close. We are close to making that happen on a regular basis. And I don't think anybody's going to be shocked to be like, oh, cool, that's just kind of the next step. But from a manager perspective, no chance. Bob didn't get the respect from the players, from what I understand, when he was at Swansea. And
Jesse Armas is going through Chris Armas
is going through it. The same thing, calling him Ted Lasso. We have other guys, David Wagner, who more German, than I think American, even though he's played for the U.S. men's national team.
In terms of perception, obviously.
Perception, yeah. And same with Pellegrino Matarazzo, who's coaching Stuttgart. I mean, even though he grew up in New Jersey and he's around the same age as us, Heath, he still feels like he cut his teeth somewhere else, and it wasn't here. But Jesse Marsch is like MLS through and through, and that's where he cut his teeth as a player and as a coach, and then got brought in and learned a ton under the RB system. And now this is his first time kind of getting outside of that. I'm super excited for him, and I probably added a keep of pressure. But I would say that yes, he's our top coach right now. I mean, these are incredible opportunities.
Here's a random question before we get into my top five. I know we've been saying we're going to get into that top five for a minute now, but how dangerous is it? Or do you think it's not dangerous, considering these stats that are coming out about Brendan Aronson right now and the record that the last person to do what he did in the Champions League was Messi when he was like 18 years old. How dangerous would it be for a club that's increasing their ownership as an American ownership group, that signs an American manager that failed at Leipzig, who then goes on and makes their first signing, Brendan Aronson, at $30 million? You think that's dangerous? Or do you think Brendan Aronson's proven himself enough? I mean, he has for us, obviously, but a big signing or a big transfer, what they're saying that's going to be, I'm talking optically, fan base, in terms of like setting the expectations. Is that a dangerous play?
I would say that the card that Leeds can play is even Bielsa wanted Brendan Aronson. That was already out there, that Bielsa was a big fan of Brendan Aronson. So I think they're okay because of that. If Brendan Aronson was never on their radar and it was all post Bielsa and all during Jesse Marsch, I think I'd fall into that same camp as you, Heath, with regard to Aronson. But yeah, we're gonna have to wait and see. Not only are they gonna have to deal with Brendan Aronson, I mean, now you're probably gonna lose Rafinha over the summer. I'd assume there's gonna be a big club that comes and swoops in for Rafinha. So not only does now you lose your beloved manager, you're probably going to lose your beloved number 10 over the summer, and then you're going to bring in another American to try to save the day. So to Blako's point in the comment, I love this. If he fails over these 12 games with Leeds, it's very similar to Bob. You kind of have to go back to maybe MLS, and then it's hard to launch from MLS as a manager back over to Europe. Once you're there, you got to stay there. Otherwise, it's going to be tough, which I think is a great point and something worth considering as we kind of talk through this opportunity. And I think he did take a bit of a risk, but again, I applaud his courage for doing it, because he was going to get the job over the summer and he didn't have to do that. But here we go.
Well, let's start with your top fives, Jimmy.
You start with me.
Yeah, we'll start with you. And what I'm curious
top five
about also,
current American managers.
Yeah, top five current American managers. We'll get into historic all time, which is a little bit harder. It's like this is the Michael Jordan, LeBron James argument. But
yeah.
Okay, so here's what we got.
This is my five. So I'll go from top.
I'm trying to close my eyes, Jimmy, from like your
number five, everybody. David Wagner. He's coaching at Young Boys. They're currently second in the Swiss Super League. 10 points behind Zurich, so they got some work to do. But I think he's done great work. Jordan Pefok in particular, he's really raised his game, scored a bunch of goals. He started off as Dortmund's reserves coach under Jurgen Klopp. If Jurgen Klopp loves the guy, then how can he not love the guy? But he helped Huddersfield. He was the second ever American to manage in the Premier League. He got them promoted 2017, helped them stay up the first year they were there. Then they went down. He resigned midway through his second season in the Premier League, third season overall. And Huddersfield ended up going back down. But that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And because that young boys are floating around and beat Manchester United in the Champions League, there's something he's doing. And so I liked him. Robin Fraser, I thought, came out of nowhere last year with the Colorado Rapids, quietly put together a very good team. They ended up winning the Western Conference over some teams that usually you see at the top, like Seattle Sounders, or even Sporting Kansas City. And so I'm Greg Vanney and Robin Fraser are like synonymous in certain circles. And Heath and I were both coached by both of these guys. And when Vanney won everything, Greg Vanney, who's the LA Galaxy coach, won everything in Toronto, Robin was his top assistant. So they're kind of like hand in hand. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Robin. I've known him for a long time, and I just thought he did a tremendous job and really overachieved with that team. And
by the way, Jimmy, just for everybody that's listening and or watching this, do you agree with this as we go through this? Obviously, as you're listening, you're hearing Jimmy kind of go from 5 to 1. But if you're watching this, feel free to poke some holes in this, because I promise you, mine's not the same top 5, which is a good problem to have. But we want to hear from you guys and hear what you guys really think.
Okay, yeah. For everybody watching on YouTube, you can see my list. For everybody listening, you're just going to have to wait. But here's number 3, Bruce Arena. Now, unfortunate New England Revolution lost in the first round of the playoffs after they set a record for the most points in a regular season to win the Supporters Shield. Now, Bruce, who I love, now not only because he picked me to go to a World Cup, I'm going to be a little bit biased. But what I'll say is, he even admitted that the schedule wasn't necessarily fair, that maybe they got to play against some weaker teams, and he doesn't really
admitted
care about
that the team that he got was crap.
Yeah. I mean, he's on fire. But that said, he has a tremendous track record of getting the most out of his players, and I think they're going to be front runners again to win it. And he'll also be on my all-time list. Just a spoiler alert. Number 2, I went with Hugo Perez, which might shock a few people because they're like, isn't he the coach of El Salvador? But yes, he's also a youth national team coach for the U.S. He represented our country at 70+ times. He's in our National Soccer Hall of Fame. The guy's an absolute beast. And I wanted to give him some love because he's another coach. And I think we're maybe seeing a theme here of coaches that know how to get their teams to overachieve, to play to their potential. Maybe it's not even overachieving, but playing to their potential. And I thought Hugo Perez, not only has he done that for the full team for El Salvador, but he's also helping build their infrastructure so they can be stronger. Because just keep in mind that 48 teams qualify for the 2026 World Cup. And I know that he desperately wants El Salvador to qualify for that one, which would be very cool for them. So I wanted to give him a shout out. I think he'll be back in MLS unless he wants to stick around and finish off his project there in El Salvador. I could see it maybe going one way or the other. And then Jesse Marsch was my top, which I talked about. And now the proof's going to be in the pudding, like where he's going to be in this list after 12 games with Leeds.
Yeah, no, the one that really stands out for me is obviously Robin Fraser. I like that one a lot because he's gotten a second chance. And a lot of managers, we've seen this recycling of coaches in MLS, and we complain about it a lot. But now you're seeing somebody like Robin Fraser, which I think one is representing people of color within the league and creating more opportunities, and sort of, if you can see it, you can be it. And now having success. Obviously, I did the last game of the year for Colorado and LAFC. And LAFC had to win that game and needed some help to go into the playoffs. And they got absolutely battered by Colorado, who obviously, like you mentioned, won the Western Conference. Fell short in the end, but, started the season not that great either. But the one that really sticks out for me is the Hugo Perez, because as I was going through my list and I was writing stuff down, I was sort of thinking of like it feels a little unfair to go with European managers. It feels a little unfair to go with MLS managers. And so I was thinking, like, who is our young up-and-coming coach? And you've got everyone from Paulo Nagamura in Houston to, Pat Noonan. You've got a number of others, Jim Curtin, other guys I think are sort of cutting their teeth. And so I've tried to shape a list and ones that I think are trending at the moment, have upside for the future as well as whatever. So we'll throw up my list as well, and I'll work from 5 to 1. But I like the Hugo Perez because it's thinking outside the box, and it's not just going with the biggest club that has the biggest coach type of thing. So I'm going to go with number 5, Jim Curtin. For me, I think he's been transformational for the Philadelphia Union. I think a sign of a good coach at times, and this is my issue with Greg Vanney, is that Greg Vanney also had an incredible amount of money to spend on players and an ownership backing that I think is different than a lot of other models. And Jim Curtin's had to do it with one of the lowest budgets in the league and consistently kind of go incrementally better year after year, where, from what I understand, players enjoy working with him. He's a motivator. He's got enough of those two sides of sort of the two faces of a coach, that one demands respect, but at the same time is approachable and likable and things like that. For Steve Cherundolo, stepped into his first full-time head coaching job. Obviously he's been an interim in the past, but stepped into this head coaching job and had a fantastic win. Obviously helps when Carlos Vela has a hat trick to kick off the season. But he went with Vela as the number 9 over Chicho Arango, who set a bunch of records when he came into the league last year. And this is one that you and I have talked about Steve Cherundolo so much, as not just one that we think has upside, but as a former teammate, as a person, as a player, just has all those tools and perspectives. Like you said, you play next to him, and we're not too far apart in age, but you're always learning from something from that wisdom that he can impart. So I have him at number 4. Okay. Matarazzo, I went with, just because taking on he's quietly gone about his business, and very much so. Not been in the limelight, but I like his approach. And in fact, obviously spending more time in Europe, and like you said with David Wagner, just more time abroad, immersed into different cultures, immersed into different environments, that I think helps you to cut your teeth. Obviously, we're seeing that with Jesse Marsh and Bob Bradley and others at different points in their career, but to see somebody sort of go on that journey and go on that path and then be rewarded, I think is good. This one might be controversial, though. Number 2, for those of you that are listening to this in audio, is Greg Burhalter. And that's just because of the fact that he's done well with this national team. The national team is a very hard job, and quite frankly, nobody wanted it after the U.S. failed to qualify for the World Cup, and he took it on the chin. Obviously, it took a long time to build it up. He went from sort of the early days where you could tell it was Burhalter going with guys that he liked, to now developing a team, developing players, while also trying to get results. They haven't been the results that we want. I haven't seen the team play great for long periods, but there's still a respect I have for the fact that he's got this team in prime position to qualify for the World Cup, and he's getting enough out of these players to get results.
Okay, can I break down your stuff? Because Jesse Marsh is one. Yeah, we good?
Yeah. Yeah, Jesse Marsh is one.
Jim Curtin's on my cusp. So he's on my on the cusp list, because Philadelphia Union, I love the financial shout, because Philly have been shoestringing, at least from buying big names for a while, as opposed to, let's say, to Toronto. But
which, by the way, is connected. My 5 to my 1 is connected, because Jim Curtin's the one that helped to develop Brendan Aronson, who's likely going to be sold on to Leeds United. And by the way, Leeds United, there's going to be a secondary sell-on fee for Philadelphia Union, which is going to help bolster their club. And so I think that there's just some connective tissue to the development of players that Jesse Marsh is going to sign. Sorry, go ahead. Poke holes.
No, Jim Curtin. I just want to give a shout out to Jim
Curtin.
Who's
this? By the way, hold on. Who's this N1234? What's this burner account you have?
I have a ton of burner accounts. Don't worry about it.
This guy or gal saying Conrad's top 5 way better. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to be in the line of fire, no problem. But at least poke holes in it. Let's go.
So I'm gonna. No, Jim Curtin, I love. He's on the cusp of getting there. Over the last 3 seasons, regular seasons in MLS, only one team, or of course only one team, but the best team over 3 years in terms of getting points in the regular season MLS is the Philadelphia Union. And I think that really speaks volumes about what Jim Curtin has done, and by also selling some players, and wanting to, not like at first we used to be very territorial. We got a good young player, we're not selling him anywhere. We're going to keep him and market him, and that's what we're going to do. But now it's like, no, we're going to send him off into the wild. He's ready to go. Let's do it. And so I like Jim Curtin. I like that ad a lot. He's on the cusp.
Jimmy, you know who didn't start this weekend was the best player for Philadelphia Union when he came on the field?
Who's that?
Paxton Aronson, Brendan's brother.
Yeah,
another player that's going to come right through and probably end up at Leeds. Who knows?
Wouldn't that be amazing? I don't know if Brendan would like that. Like, hey, dude, this is you got to go take your baby steps somewhere else, like I did at RB Salzburg. All right, so number 4, Steve Cherundolo. Listen, love the guy with all my heart. I might be a little bit early to put him on the top 5 American coaches. He would even admit that.
It's a power ranking.
Okay, fine.
The guy battered Colorado, who battered them to the end of the season. One of the best teams that was in the league last year.
I get it. Colorado has Robin Fraser. I get it. I guess I'm thinking more of over the last year and maybe not this past weekend. But fair. Number 3, Matarazzo. Dude, Stuttgart's in the relegation zone. They've been sucking it this year. Now, I will say that I really love what he's done. And it shouldn't go, if it's by power rankings, Pellegrino Matarazzo, I think he's be a little bit more of a lifetime achievement award for what he's done at Stuttgart.
That's fair. I will take that note, Jimmy, and I will put it in the comment box next to my bed.
Okay, so I'll jump to number 1, Jesse Marsh. We're on the same page. Number 2, Greg Burhalter. Now, the only reason I didn't put Greg in my top 5, and Sergio said, "Wow, that was interesting. No Burhalter."
Yeah, because you didn't want to get punched in the face by the comment section.
No. I've got no problem. He's number 1 on my on the cusp list, Burhalter. But what I'm going to judge him on is qualifying for the World Cup. Qualifying for the World Cup is what I'm judging him on. I love that we won the Nations League, first time that tournament was ever held, and even then, fortunate to get the results that we did. But we take them. Gold Cup, I actually thought that was his most tremendous performance as a manager over a certain period of time. World Cup qualifying, not as convinced, but I don't give a shit about that as long as we qualify. So I can't put him in my top 5 until we qualify, and once we do, he's going way up the charts. Okay, he's going way up the top. So that's my one issue with Greg. I just that's his job is to qualify for the World Cup, and then once we get there, second part of his job is to actually have a good run. But I can't. I get where you're coming from, but I can't. It was interesting to your point of I haven't really been happy with his performances. I see glimpses, but not like and so I agree. But this isn't a pile on Greg. I do think he's done a lot of great things, and I think he's broadened our player pool, and the future's so incredibly bright that makes me excited. But yeah, that's the only reason I didn't put Greg on there. But he's on my cusp. Also on the cusp, I had Matarazzo, I had Vanny, I had Curtin, and I had Brian Schmetzer from Seattle Sounders, who probably doesn't get the respect that he deserves because he's like your favorite uncle.
Jimmy, we asked for the top 5, and now you're trying to get extra love by putting cusp people like all at 6.
Just the honorable mention.
This is like when you get to Sunday in golf and like everyone's tied for 44th place. Like you're like, oh yeah, they just missed the cut, but they're good too. No. They don't get to make it.
I will take the just missed the cut paycheck, by the way, those golfers. Just tell me where to sign up for that.
I agree. Well, Jimmy, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got MLS opening weekend stuff to talk about. So we'll be right back.
My name is Travis. I am the founder of Uber. And contrary to what you might have read, I am not a monster.
He is bold and uncompromising.
Is this legal? Roll or die.
You need to start listening to the people that help build this company.
The city has been taken!
There you have it. We're back, Jimmy. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about MLS opening weekend. A lot of things happened with regard to the U.S. Men's national team. Leggett scored what I thought was a fantastic goal on his Revs debut. Do you think for a player like him, Weston McKennie's out, right? We're still talking about Gianluca Busio. Where does he fit in? Obviously, there was COVID the last time around. He's in relegation battle. Tanner Tessman's never really been brought in. Talked about Luca De La Torre. And then you go back to the last 2 years, and I know Leggett is on this older end of things. People don't like him. Doesn't have that flash and that sort of upside that I think people are looking for. But do you think he can fill the role or fill the void in a bind? He's one of our most experienced national team players over the last few years.
He would be my top choice to fill that role at the moment. But
do you think he was out? Do you think he was out? Say Weston McKennie's healthy. Do you think Leggett's national team sort of window, maybe he's called in, but it's sort of kind of not in your 23 at this point? Because he wasn't in mine. And he was one of the ones that I thought was sort of starting to get phased out as our 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds were getting more experience in this window. Or in this.
No, if Leggett comes in firing and is hot, it's a conversation we've had plenty of times where Edson Buttle and Hercules Gomez in 2010 always stand out for me, who just got hot at the right time. And Bob took them to the World Cup because they're hot, man. You got to go with the hot hand. And so if Legett's playing well and Bruce Arena's excellent at revitalizing players' careers, and that's why he goes out and gets experienced players. He knows how to win an MLS, baby. So he went and got Josie.
You think he can bring Josie back? You think he can bring Omar Gonzalez?
I think that he can get them playing at a level that will be.
I don't think Omar Gonzalez, by the way. That's one that I'm just like, I've watched enough that I'm just like, I think he's on the wrong side of 30 and has just too far to go at the international level. That I think he's lost that step.
I don't see it happening with Omar, but. I don't know. I'm kind of curious what everybody else thinks. And hit us up at Qué Golazo Pod on Twitter if you're listening to us audio-wise, or hit us up right now if you're watching on YouTube. If Josie went on a run and scored 10 goals in 10 games, would you not? Say he went say he had like a career year and scored 25 goals.
Is that not what Jordan Pefok's doing right now? And he can't
I get it. I get that. I know that's what I'm saying. No, you're exactly right. So I don't know. That's essentially why. Remember when the World Cup that I went to, Chingy and Brian Ching and Taylor Twellman going neck and neck. Those guys were scoring so many goals, and ultimately Chingy ended up going and Taylor stayed home. But I don't know. It's really interesting that I don't know if that's going to happen. So this is probably all hypothetical, but I find that interesting in terms of the hot hand. Now, Leggett, I think really knows.
We've also got Gio Reyna, by the way, that they say might be back for that window. So
he seems like a glass house right now, though, dude.
I don't believe that until I see it. But
he's got Christian Pulisic-itis is what he's got, where he's got a little like an issue, and then it's hard to shake the next issue and the issue after that, and then your confidence is a little it's wavering. Man, this is tough, and I think that I could see Leggett being in there. He's got experience playing against Mexico. We know what we can get from him. Is it going to win us the game down to Mexico City with him in there? Maybe not.
Okay, so you get.
But in terms of like the Panama game is what I'm really circling my count. I am properly nervous for that Panama game because I think they're well coached, and I think they are going to beat Honduras in that first one. And I don't know what's going to happen to Mexico City. I still think it's a coin flip, and it's going to be squeaky bum time for that whole 90 minutes.
I went to the Honduras away and the Panama away in the last qualifying rounds. I went to the Costa Rica at home in Red Bull Arena, and I'll tell you, every single one of those, and obviously the Costa Rica was a really bad result. We got beat all over the field. But there was a little bit of hope in the Honduras, scoring late to draw that game. But there was a nervousness that you could feel.
I was at Red Bull Arena for that one. I was there too.
That one was earlier, and it was just a beating. They just got beat, and they didn't look good from start to finish. It reminded me of the U.S. against Panama in that first game, where you're just like, oh, this is really bad. You're going to get beat. And now we're going into that last one where you're saying, Panama is the qualifying game, right? That's the one that matters the most. They're trying to qualify. U.S. is trying to qualify, and that makes me really nervous. However, at home, I think we're much better than we are away. But I don't want to look past would you put Leggett in if you get a Leggett card to use for one of these games? Is it once we've already qualified the third game, you throw them in, have a good time? Thank you for your services.
Yeah, you got me. I tried to find my loophole there, and you took it. I would say, based on who's available, maybe Mexico. You just get somebody that is going to do the work, is serviceable, can move the game along, and can chip in on occasion. I like Leggett. I think he provides some experience, and I've had this conversation with some people as I started coaching a little bit more youth recently. I'm like super volunteer dad over here, but it's incredible to me how much we lack in-game management. Like, people don't know how to control a game, control a flow of a game with or without the ball. And I think Leggett has some of those intangibles. Plus, he's a leader, and I think we're going to get a Leggett that probably knows, if I don't show up in this game, if I get my next opportunity and I don't show up for this one, I might not be going to a World Cup. So imagine if he had that kind of edge to him and he gets out on the field. I don't want him to be out there trying too hard, but I want them out there. I want to see the best Leggett that I can see. I think from a mental state, Greg might be, playing him like a fiddle at this particular moment. And now we're going to have to rely on him in a big moment. Mexico City is going to be a grind. It is going to be a grind. And we know that Tata Martino, and we're going to get into this as it gets closer, of course, but we know he's going to have that team well prepared. He's going to have us broken down in every single area of the fields. And outside of the Gold Cup final, I thought the Nations League final, they were better than us, and we just happened to get the result. But the Gold Cup final, I thought, was a little bit more even. I thought we made it a little bit more difficult for them to score. Funes Mori was up top, though. Yeah, very, very, very similar. If Jimenez is out there and Chucky Lozano's healthy and Tecatito's on one side, and then they can bring on, Alexis Vega and Henry Martin, and Lainez. You're like, that's just two really good front threes that they can bring on and hurt us in different ways. So it's going to be a test. But I don't think Leggett in that part of the field, if he doesn't play well, I don't think it's completely detrimental to what we try to get in Mexico City, which I think is a draw. Anyway, I don't know. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's tough to say when I'm thinking about just Sebastian Leggett and his role within the national team, right? When do you use him? When do you need him? Because you and I both know that there was always players on every team where you go, I don't get it. I don't see it. And that's not about Leggett, because usually what it boils down to is trust, right? A coach that knows that, like, when I put you in, you're not going to cost me a game. You might not be my X factor. Might not be my Weston McKennie that has that clutch gene, but you're going to be able to deliver a solid performance. Like we talked about, those 7s and 8s, like across the board. We saw that when you look at historically players that weren't in the national team forever, Kyle Beckerman in and out of the national team, and then had a long run of like, okay, I trust this guy. Dax McCarty in the last window, where it's like you weren't being called upon that much, but when you were, you were closing out the games, right? Final 10 minutes, scrap, fight, do those things. And there is a trust factor that I think plays into some of those roles, and less so about, can Leggett, because Leggett scored a lot of goals for the national. I think, and he played a ton of games over the last couple of years. But I wonder if there's not a better attacking option, because I don't think he's super defensive. I don't think he's super offensive. I think he's a good 8 kind of two-way player that can connect the lines. But the times that I've seen the games that are really, really tough, I've rarely seen him be able to solve problems in the way that a Yunus Musa can, spin out, change the point of attack, get in the attack, kind of have that more confidence on the ball where the game's a little faster and the space is a little tighter. And by the way, I want to know who everybody else thinks impressed the most during the first round of MLS games. Obviously, you just saw today the young American Argentinian from NYCFC, 14 years old, the youngest homegrown signing ever, on his 14th birthday signed with NYCFC, which is absolutely wild. And when I talk about these pipelines, Jimmy, we've got a lot going on. But want to know from everybody who impressed them the most during these first round of MLS games. Jimmy, just thinking about the national team, right? Gyasi Zardes, is he another one that you're sort of like, where does he fit? Because he's another one that I know upsets people.
Well, he didn't start this week for Columbus. Right. We went with Miguel Berry, who I thought was very good in their 4-0 win over Vancouver. Just a little bit busier and a little bit more active, which is weird because I think that's what Gyasi does really well, is kind of just moving around, getting his spots. But he looks a little indecisive. He had a great chance one-on-one with the goalkeeper and just hesitated. And that kind of sums up Gyasi Zardes, I think, in some ways, for a lot of people, that he was about 6 yards away and just took too long. So a defender came in and ultimately led to a goal because the defender cleared it right to one of his teammates and that player scored. But it just and it just gives everybody a reason, like, that's why we don't play Gyasi Zardes for the men's national team. And I actually thought that Miguel Berry looked very good for Columbus, and his hold-up play and his movement in and around the box. And Columbus just looked up for it in general. I thought they played very, very well against the Vancouver team that looked a little bit listless. I'm curious to see how Vancouver does this particular season. But yeah, I mean, Gyasi Zardes is another guy that's a spot starter, situational player. I don't know. At this point, I'd probably prefer. Well, I know I would prefer Jordan Pefok at this point. He's a hot hand. He's got confidence. He I think has room to grow. I think we know what we're going to get from Gyasi Zardes, where I'm still kind of curious. I got some more questions about Jordan Pefok, and he's answered some of them, but I want to see that now with the national team. And also, I thought about this some more off camera, because I think about this stuff all the time, you and me. And sometimes we talk about it too. But if Jordan Pefok wasn't doing what you wanted for the national team, when does he warrant another look to actually fulfill that opportunity, or get that opportunity to fulfill what you want from him? Because if he says, okay, I took your information, Greg Burhalter, thank you so much, and now I'm banging goals in for fun for young boys, and I'm doing all the little things that are necessary to get me back into the team, and I'm still not getting into the team, what else? I don't know what else I can do. So it's I definitely want Pefok in over Zardes. But
well, let me ask you this then, Jimmy.
Go ahead.
Caleb Wiley, 17-year-old for Atlanta United, scores in his debut. And it got me thinking of, similarly to this 14-year-old signing with NYCFC. I'm blanking on his name at the moment. But do you think there's room? Natalie Cross says Chicharito was great versus NYCFC. I thought so as well. He was super busy and a phenomenal banger of a goal.
He's another one. His movement inside the box is like the way he pulls away and creates space is insane. And his anticipation is great. But yeah, keep going.
But with Caleb Wiley, do you think that these so we're at basically the start of March. So March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. You got 8-9 months for somebody to emerge. Is there somebody either in the pool? Is there an up-and-coming player that you think could break through as the next sort of star? Because again, Ricardo Pepi starts, doesn't score. They end up scoring after he's subbed out. They draw against Dortmund, which is a huge result for Augsburg. But for him personally, he's not in the top performance. He looked busy. He looked active in the game for the times that I was watching. But I just wonder why he's in a better place than, say, a Caleb Wiley. If Caleb Wiley goes on a tear of 8-10 games as a 17-year-old, is there room for anybody to come in, or is this sort of like maybe there's that special spot, the Julian Green pick?
It's tough. I mean, there's another 17-year-old defender playing wing back for Inter Miami named Noah Allen. He also came in and played 78 minutes against Chicago. And what I think is super cool about these young players playing is they don't look out of place, right. and Caleb Riley comes on as a sub and scores a good goal where it's a goal where for me, what I love is it didn't feel reactionary. Like he anticipated. I mean, obviously he got up to the top team as quickly because he has these special gifts. And I love that sniffing things out, having that understanding and anticipating and being proactive as opposed to being reactive. And I love when I see these younger players have that. And it just feels so natural to them, right? They're in good spots. They're reading the game. They're making things look calm and easy. Honestly, I get really excited about the future of MLS and our national team and all that good stuff. It's going to be great. Yeah. But to jump in over somebody at this point, because all you're going to have after these next 3 games are friendlies, and it's going to be really hard unless somebody goes on that. I think less from a defensive standpoint and more from a goal scoring standpoint, where you see the Robbie Finleys, who also made the 2010 World Cup team, right? He just was scoring at the right time. Mm-hmm. I could see you maybe throwing a roster spot to somebody like that. Like if Jordan Pefok, and we're like a month out from the World Cup and he just keeps going on this tear, you got to take him. Like he forces your hand. But the other areas of the fields, it's so much harder to warrant that unless they're doing something so productive. I will say the one knock that I have on Antonee Robinson, we've talked about it before, is his lack of crossing. It could just be better. He's so good at getting to the end line and getting balls across, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily good crosses. And I wish that he had a better deep cross, like, from the top of the box, because I think we're going to get a lot of space in those areas in the biggest of games. And what can
you're going to have to be able to break out in those moments, right? Because if you're going to allow teams to get, if you can't attack with pace and you allow teams to sit and bunker and they realize just how much the U.S. has consistently struggled in a bunker system, you're going to have people that can have 1-2 passes and whip that ball around that back line when they're not able to set up in their blocks.
It's exactly right. So is there a left back that can emerge or a wing back that can reemerge that can do that consistently? And I don't know if that's Sammy Vines, who's over at Royal Antwerp, or because we have a lot of guys that are good at getting to the end line and getting it across, which is obviously I love it. I love Antonee Robinson. He's our number one until proven otherwise. But I wish he had that in his bag as well. I want that tool in his tool belt because I don't think he has it. And I think it would be a nice weapon for us to have.
Yep. I'm quickly realizing the player pool that's coming through, and it's distracting me from the now, which is kind of a nice feeling, right? When I think about the fact that you had the what was the RSL Kai kid, Axel Kai, 14 years old, and then NYCFC also signed the Christian McFarland, 14 years old. Like you have a number of these kids, and now you have a number of these leagues and infrastructures, Jimmy. You think about yourself, no matter where you were in your development at 14 years old. Carrizo plays he's Argentinian American. He's raised in Manhattan, I believe, or maybe Westchester County. But he's a player that's playing for the U.S. youth national teams. And now at 14 years old, he's going to be getting games in the MLS Next Pro League, and he's eligible to play in that. I just think it's a really interesting time that's allowing me to deflect some of this USMNT talk, knowing that. But I am genuinely curious, and maybe obviously he's way out of this because he could be in 4 years, 26 a starter at 18 years old. But some of the players we have now are starters when you're thinking about hosting a World Cup and some of these young stars coming to fruition in the same way that Axel Kai will be 18 or 19 years old in the next World Cup. So I'm curious to see if anybody now that's 18 or 19 could slip into the national team. But it certainly seems like, just kind of racking my brain that there's not really anybody that I can think that hasn't already been capped or isn't sort of finding their game. There's few that could, you talked about, round the corner, Sammy Vines or somebody like that, where you're like, we've seen them take these massive strides in the same way that Gio Reyna, when he got to Dortmund, took massive strides from when he was at NYCFC. I
think it's going to be tough for a teenager to break through at this point, that they haven't already broken through, because I just don't feel like the games that we're going to get there's going to be friendlies leading up to the World Cup. So I just think it's going to be hard unless one of them blows up. And I honestly think it'll only be an attacking player. It won't be somebody that you're trusting defensively, because it just might be a little bit hard to get them to understand how you want to move and play and all that. And I think that's why he leans on players that he trusts. Now, I do want to give a shout out to Gaga Slonina, who was sick this game, this past weekend for Chicago Fire, 17 years old, got another clean sheet, 5 saves, made a really good one at the end against Inter Miami.
I thought you were saying sick, like ill,
No. Like sick, like the kids say, not super susty like you, Heath, like they're sick. So I thought he was great, and his future is incredibly bright. I want to make sure we get him cap tied to the U.S. so he can't go to Poland. So
he's been called. He's been brought in, right?
He has. But
yeah.
But still, we have to get him cap tied to make sure we lock him in. He's tremendous. And his future's so bright. And then I want to give a shout out to Paxton Pomykal. I thought he was pretty good against Toronto this past weekend. Dallas attacking mid, who, he was on the tip of people's tongues for a while as an attacking midfielder. He does have a little something to his game. We saw at the U20 World Cup a couple of years ago. He's 20, I think he turns 23 this year. He's born in 99. So I just thought he looked a little bit like, I saw some flashes of the old Paxton Pomykal, and I think that he provides a little something too, that he's not the 19-year-old that I think, or 18-year-old that we're referencing, but he's another player.
The Jesus Ferreira is one that 2 years ago was really good. Last year struggled a bit towards the end, and we're seeing we're talking about teenagers and then young 20s, players that are still extreme in development, not like 25 and on, where you're sort of like the upside. Where is it at? There's still opportunity for him to become a player that we saw flashes of, which I like. We're not past that window where you just go, oh, he's just going to be a good player, but he's not going to be a great player.
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, I want to give a shout out to FC Dallas, who signed their 33rd homegrown player. It's Antonio Carrera, who's goalkeeper, born in 2004. He can play for the U.S. or Mexico. He's in our January he was in our January US U20 camp, and I just like FC Dallas. Just the amount of talent they're pumping out of that academy is just tremendous, and long may that continue.
Yeah, that is phenomenal. Well, Jimmy, we're going to start to wrap this thing up, but any closing thoughts? Anything left on the top of your mind with regard to the USMNT?
Well, I just wanted to give another shout out to Jesse Marsh. I think this is an unbelievable opportunity for him, and whether he wants to carry the torch or not, it's going to be a way for him to reshape the narrative about how coaches, American coaches, are perceived, both male or female, that we are capable of holding our own at the highest of levels. And so I hope he goes out there and proves us all right. I think that we're all cheering for him. It's one of those, I think, rare occasions where everybody's like, I hope Jesse does well, and because it's going to pave the way for more opportunity, just like it did when it started with Claudio's and Jovan Karofsky's back in the day, Eric Winalda's, like all those guys, they started to lay that little bit of groundwork. And then the next generation took advantage, and look where we are now from a player perspective. Well, this is a really important watershed moment, I think, for American managers. And it's a high risk, high reward, but if he nails it, it could open up more opportunities for coaches, along with Chris Armas at Manchester United, which is pretty ridiculous as well. But this is a little bit different. Being the main guy is a little bit different than being the assistant.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think, only time will tell and how we'll be able to judge this, and also judge how we define success, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard because we look at the top managers, Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, all these ones that are historic, and even Bielsa in terms of what he's done in his career. And you go, well, how do we compare that to Jesse Marsch? Jesse Marsch has to go on his own journey in the same way that David Wagner is, Bob Bradley has, Bruce Arena has. And we have to define success somewhere within all of that in terms of, might not be winning a Champions League in the upcoming years, and define success within the confines of being a manager of a team that is cash strapped, but still a historic club. Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you more about that probably as we start to see how his results start to play out. But that is it for us. This is the end of the USMNT Hour. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in. And as a reminder, you can follow us at Qué Golazo Pod on social media. Send us your comments, send us your questions. We'll keep that conversation going. And of course, from myself, Jimmy Conrad, our producer, Des Norris, we thank you guys so much, and make sure you're tuned in and subscribe to Qué Golazo, because there's much more episodes coming out throughout the week. See you guys next time.